Okay. Whoever is in the middle of eating there, please be careful. We can hear you.
It's only here or there. Oh, and he's eating breakfast.
All right. But today actually going to be very interesting. Every day is interesting, but this particular point is very interesting. The Rava yesterday brought a raya from a brisa. Okay, the brisa was very hard to read, and on the basis of that, he showed that it was a case. It happened to be that there's what they call two sets of Adim, two, but it's really three. No, it's two plus the Adim that showed that one set was conspiring. And he showed by process of elimination, so to speak, because there were so many difficulties in the brisa, he showed that it had to be a case where the witnesses that were shown to be conspirators had previously been contradicted, and yet the law of conspiracy went through. So he showed that even though witnesses were contradicted, we don't say, and in the end they were found to be conspiracy. We don't say that the original contradiction was enough to say that they were disqualified and therefore not eligible to be considered conspirators. That was Rava. Now, what Abaya does is, and I want to explain it outside and then inside. Remember, I mentioned to you that there are four primary skills for learning Gemara. One of them is to understand what we call argumentation. Some people call rhetoric. To understand, and some people say that they're different. But what is that? So usually, let's say somebody reads something in a way that proves their point, I don't have to prove my point to disprove them. All I have to do is show that there's another way to read. This is what I'm telling you is very, very important. Here, a Rava read the Bryce in a way that demonstrates this point. I don't have to disprove it. In order to knock him out, I don't have to prove that his point is not true. I have to just show that his proof is not true. What makes a proof not true if it's not necessarily true? So if the second I can show an alternative reading, he's out. Not because I disproved this point, but I disproved this proof. To disprove a proof, all I need is what? Is an alternative. I hope I'm communicating. You understand? I don't have to disprove the point to disprove a proof. I just have to give an alternative reading. So the proof is not airtight. That's all. Ironic, huh? Exactly. Now, the only problem is like this. Today, Abaya gives an alternative reading and then proves it. He proves it. So that's a shock. That's a shock. So Rashi has to go out of his way to, and I want to tell you why it is. So why does he do it? If all I need to knock out a guy's proof is to give a counter reading, an alternative reading, so why do I have to prove my point? I don't need to prove my point. As long as it's a possibility, you're out. When you want to prove something, you have to be the only possibility. When I want to disprove it, I just have to give a possibility. The answer is that we're going to see because he's in an unlikely position. That's why. So since his alternative reading is as unlikely as all the readings we're giving are, he has a particularly unlikely reading. So he wants to bring a support for the alternative. Usually we don't do it, but today we're going to do it. Okay, and we're going to see. So what happened yesterday? The way that Rava read the Brisa, it came out that the witnesses were contradicted, and then, and yet we're still found to be what? Conspirers. So we see the contradiction is considered just the beginning of conspiring, and the proof of conspiring hasn't completed itself yet. But we don't consider it to be a distinct or discrete disqualification prior to the finding to being found guilty of conspiring. Good. So Abaya says, Abaya says, no, I don't. Yes, but even despite all those difficulties, I don't have to. I didn't give you the line. I guess everybody knows where it is. He says, no. He says, I don't have to read your way. Why? But rather, okay, instead of saying what really here, there's just one set of witnesses, obviously besides the ones who find them to be conspirators. And what happened was that when the witnesses who testified that they were conspirators, not only did they say that they weren't present at the time that they said that what they witnessed took place, but also they also testified about what they falsely testified to and said the opposite. The Afkinu Vazminu, what happened was that they won. They found them to be conspirators, and then, even though it says the other way, and then they also testified the opposite of what the original one said. What does that mean to say? One set of witnesses came And the last set of witnesses that showed that the first set, the only set, were conspirators. He said, listen, the day that you said that all that happened, you were with us, and that you never witnessed such a thing. Not only that, but in a different time than you said, it really did happen that the master knocked out the tooth of his slave and then knocked out his eye. So really what? So the truth is, it happens to be true that the slave goes free and the master has to pay him for his eye, not like you said that he goes free and the master has to pay him for what? Only for a tooth, okay? And that's the opposite, because they said the conspiring witness said you only had to pay for a tooth. He said no, he had to pay for an eye. Okay, now. Okay, he has to pay for it, and that's okay. He has to pay for it, and the truth is okay, and therefore what? So that is why they have to pay the slave for the price of the eye. That's why they have to pay for the price of the eye, because since they conspired to say that he only had to pay the price of the tooth, they were causing the slave to lose the true payment that he was supposed to get, which was what? The price of the eye. Now he says, and I said, why should I? Now, what's the point? Because we don't understand, how could the master possibly be happy about what the original witnesses said? There were no opposing witnesses. There was nobody there. According to the story we're telling, there were no opposing witnesses. They're just these two guys came. That's all there is. So that's why Abaye is stuck, Rashi says. Why is that? Because on the one hand, he gave a reasonable possibility, but the language doesn't make sense. Now he's going to show you later that it has to. So therefore, he brings you proof that despite the fact that it's difficult, that he's going to have to add a fact in and say, what? You know what? That the master knew that these guys were liars, and he knew the truth was that he was guilty in such of letting the slave go free. I would have to pay more. So he's happy that these guys are lying. He knows that they're liars, and he's happy about their lie. But that's a hard pressed reading. She's going to bring a proof that since from the later on in the brisa, you must read it that there's only one. That you have to read it this way. That the witnesses who testified to the conspiring not only found them to be conspirators, but also contradicted what they said. Also, I'm forced to read the same thing here, as opposed to what Rava said, and I prove that it's reasonable for me to give an alternative. That's really what's taking place. I'm kind of pushed into it, even though it's a very hard pressed alternative. And I want to just tell you one thing you should know in general, and this is very important. The Gemara teaches you a million times. Many things in life don't fit, but they're true anyway. Often things are not true. Here, look at Kavschus. If you look at the examples of the Gemara, kavschus means that you give a kosher person, you give them the benefit of the doubt. Sometimes it doesn't look so good. And the Gemara gives examples when the people who gave the benefit of the doubt, it was such a crazy possibility to turn out to be true. You know, saying it turned out to be true. A lot of times things don't fit, but that's how God makes life. Sometimes things really look weird, but it's the truth. That's the truth. That's right. It's the truth. And I'll tell you a true story. My home in Yerushalayim, Baruch Hashem, my wife is incredible tzaddikas. So she hosted 30 people for every meal in Shabbos, almost consistent for years and years and years. And everyone, just about every meal, ridiculous. So if somebody ever said, "Can I come?" It would be unlikely. I could say, "What do you mean I can't?" Who didn't we have? We had everybody. It just so happened that one time it was a whole story, etc., etc. And we decided, this particular meal, we're not going to have anybody. My wife's not feeling so good. One time, we're not going to have anybody. So a guy came to me and said, "Can I come?" I said, "Listen, I'm really sorry. You're not going to do it just this week. We're actually not having anybody." No, okay. Guy says, "I'm sorry." I said, "I'm sorry another time." No. In the meantime, something happened. There was an emergency, and a whole group of 30 people absolutely had to come. And even though my wife was sick, she said, "Okay, I'll take him. I'll take him." So we come, and this guy, who I said my wife wasn't feeling well, was courteous enough. He says, "You're going to come by just to wish her, to see how she did, wish her a Fush labor." He walks in Friday night, there's 30 people. This place, there's not a room to move. And I looked at the guy, I was so embarrassed. I said, "You're not going to believe what happened." But that's the truth. You have to know so many things like that. So many things which are unlikely are the truth. That's why the Gemara is not afraid of. And the second point I wanted to tell you yesterday, I forgot, and it's very, very, this is extremely important what I'm about to tell you. It's also in relation to what you said yesterday. I have a third point in relation to what you said. Yesterday we were asking, listen, you give such a far possibility. So I told you there are circumstances that demand it, but I want you to know something. And this is something that most people in Israel, unfortunately, the people have gone so far away from Judaism. You know what I mean? So the Gemara seems to them to be just a whole sham. And the word in modern Hebrew, this is a tragedy. In modern Hebrew, here when we say the word teretz, for example, in the Gemara, It's a wholly wonderful. Teretz means that according to one way of looking at things, it doesn't fit. But if you're broad enough and deep enough to see another way, it works out. That's a teretz. In modern Hebrew, the word teretz means an excuse. It's a negative. I'll tell you teretzim. Don't give me teretzim. The word of the Gemara is a word. Yeah, you're faking me out. Yeah. Making stuff up. Yeah. I give me teretzim. It's a negative word. Now, and what you have to know is why so many secular Jews reject the Gemara. And I'll tell you why. Look, you learn Gemara. Look what happens. The Gemara says, well, that doesn't make it. No. It's a case where there's a dwarf. Who? Where, dwarf? Yeah, no, it's a dwarf. No, it's a dwarf. No, he's a dwarf and he's in a hole. Is a dwarf in a hole? What? What are you talking about? Where did all that come from? So they look at the Gemara. What do you mean? No, it was on a Tuesday. It happened over there. Say, where did all that come from? Now, here's you have to know, and this is what most people don't know, and you have to know. Here, you're doing your taxes one night. You got your paper in front, and you call up your CPA. You say, listen, I something's wrong. I got a problem. He looks, he says, you got the wrong form in front of you. You got the 1040. You need the 10 this. You say to the guy, I'm not on the picture phone here. How do you know what form I have? The guy says, I'm a CPA. He says, I do this. I don't do this 24 hours a day. I do this 48 hours a day. I know all the papers by heart, et cetera, et cetera. I just hear you talk. I know what's in front of you. I don't have to see. I know what paper you got because I know these papers by like Ashrei. I know like Ashrei, better than Ashrei. Dude. Now, in the Gemara, this what's called in all systems, in all professions, there are things that are given to anybody in the business. In law and things, we have what's called a constellation of cases. Anybody educated in certain thing knows. Here, remember I mentioned that when this gentleman asked me, every guy who learns Gemara knows, listen, there's a few ways to buy a thing with money. You can buy it right out. You can pay it down. You own it from the first penny. You own it from the last penny. You own pro rata. There's only a certain amount of possibilities. So in all the different fields of halacha, we have certain cases that every guy in the business knows. You test this with what about androgynous, half slave, half what do you? That's what we. Those are our tools. You go to an electrician. He's got tools on his belt. He got a tester and a thing, etc. Everybody who learns halacha knows. You test it with the half slave, half thing. You test it with the androgynous. You test it with the tumtum. Everybody does it. Certain case, every system has its constellation of cases. These are the cases that we use to flush out these laws. Everybody knows these things. So the secular people, they read the Gemara and go, what? A dwarf? Well, who's that? What dwarf? Whatever. Everybody, we always use dwarfs in these cases. That was the tester. You said in a certain field of halacha, there are certain cases everybody used all the time. We always use these cases. Here, I don't know if you ever learned that one of our precious books in modern Jewish history is called the Minchas Chinuch. So every 2 minutes, it's almost like a cartoon. Every time he goes to a mitzvah. Now, what about half slave, half this? What about that? Yeah, those are the tools. Everybody knows these things. Yes, and there's always those things are always there. So even though any time you add a circumstance or to a case that's not written there, or anytime you take a secondary meaning of a word rather than its prime meaning, that's a hard-pressed explanation. It doesn't mean it's not true. And especially, so as much as I'm telling you that things are hard pressed, but hard pressed are not ridiculous. There's a good reason to say those things. Everybody knows that in the base manager, everybody uses these cases all the time. These are the standard discussion. So it didn't say it, but everybody knows that's the normal way of doing it. Everybody talks about these cases. It's always done that way. So, exactly. Everybody knows we all dealt with it. Exactly. We always dealt with that case. Here, the slave is tied up. The slave is not tied up. The sheep is tied. The goat is tied up. The goat is tied. Everybody knows these cases. You don't have to state everything all the time. Everybody in the business knows. You're working on a short order place. Give me a B and a B with a hold the B. With the short order cook. Whatever. Hold the. Everybody talks that. Every business has its shop talk. The Torah people had shop talk. I'm just trying to say, I'm not yelling at you. Don't listen to what they say and help those people to understand. These were the stock and trade of everybody. You weren't in the base manager if you didn't think these thoughts. Say that was normal. Anyway, so saying that's what I wanted to add for you yesterday. Yes, it is. So it's still a parish nachak. It doesn't matter because the primary rule of reading is anything that's not written in the text isn't there. The assumption is that what that's not there is not there. Okay, you say it's there. Okay, it could be true, but you lost the point. In the rules of argumentation, you lose a point because this guy can give a parish maruva. What is that? A completely satisfactory explanation. He doesn't have to change the normal meaning of the word, or he doesn't have to add a circumstance that's not written. He's stronger in argumentation, so we're going to give him priority as an argument. But what I'm trying to tell you is that but in life, the way Hashem does, and certainly in the Gemara, the fact that a given argument may be hard pressed does not tell us, oh, it can't be true. Of course, it can be true. The craziest things in the world are true all the time. That's what every intelligent person knows that. Okay, good. Get ready. So now, Abai is going to show us from the continuation of the Mishnah that he's right to read the way he's reading, that the witnesses that show conspiracy also, not only they show conspiracy, they also out and out contradict what the original people said, and that will explain the Brisa. Mimai. How do I know to read it that way? He says, "Me the Seifa b'meifach la'asama." Since the later part of the Brisa is also where the witnesses who testify the conspiracy also contradict them and show that they're conspirators. Okay, Reishanami. Also, the beginning is the same thing. Okay, now let me take Tani Sefer. Let's see his illustration. Let's look in the Sefer and see that he does it. The Katani Sefer, the later part learns. They said, yeah, we testified that the guy knocked out his friend, his slave's tooth. Okay, but see, and then he knocked out his eye. So he owes him he goes free and he owes him the eye. And the slave is happy about it. The slave is happy about this. Okay, and now it turns out what? That they were conspirators. They have to pay the price of the eye to the master. Why? Because they're going to make the master pay for the eye. Why does it doesn't make any sense? Again, you see the Bryce has to be filled in. If the later witnesses who show that the first ones are conspirators never testified about the master doing any damage. Okay, then the conspirators have to pay for the whole slave. They were conspiring to make the master have to lose his slave. They should paying an eye. They should pay for the whole slave. El Pshita, so obviously the Komodu Kula Bahavla must be that the later witnesses supported the liar's testimony. They supported the false testimony because it was true that the master injured his slave and such that he has to go free with the Kafkina. But the only thing is what? But they changed what the order was exactly. But they also found them to be conspirators. One, they said, listen, the day you said it happened, you weren't there. It never happened. In addition to that, I'm telling you, on another day, the master did indeed injure his slave. But the only thing is when he first knocked out his eye and then the tooth. So the truth is that it's true what you said, even though you're liars, that the slave goes free. But it's false what you said that he owes him for an eye. Okay, but he only owes him for a tooth. So therefore, what? So it comes out. But if you add and subtract everything, so the conspirators were only making the master lose one drop more, which was what? They had to pay for the eye and not for the tooth. But they weren't making him lose the slave. So now you have to explain it. So you see what? So the only way to explain it is what? Is that they not only did they show him conspirators, but they also contradicted. So I'm going to say the same thing in the ratio, even though it's hard pressed. Now he did a beautiful job. It doesn't need my compliment. Okay, very dummy. Okay, he doesn't mean to ratify, but it is beautiful anyway. Okay, now Gemara says, now this is what she asked yesterday. We have a problem because in general, you're right. In general, you don't need to go to court to be true. Money owed is owed. You don't have to go to court for it to be owed. But we did the damage, etc., etc. But when it comes to knas, we're going to see. When it comes to machlokas, Rashi, and Tosfos. When it comes to knas, until they're based in paskins, you don't owe the knas. No. So for Rashi, it's because you could always admit. But Tosfos says no. Tosfos says even according to the opinion, for example, where there's no chance to admit. Let's say they're witnesses. So there's no chance to admit, even according to Tosfos, even when there's no chance to admit, as opposed to other cases, okay, but it comes to a knas, until the based in paskins, you don't pay a knas. Okay, that was the machli. Yes. So now he says why? He says the Gemara said, but let's just flush out the case. Hey, dummy, what actually happened? Either call me. We're just mopping up now. Either call me if the later witnesses said that you guys were liars, but it was a later day that the damage took place. Okay, then they should still have to pay the master for the full slave. Why? Because at the moment, because nobody testified that at the time that they lied, right? That nobody testified about that time. Okay, that the slave was supposed to go free. Okay, the mechima chayv legabra, because when they said the guy had to pay, he wasn't obligated to pay for the slave. So it can't be that the witnesses who testified to the conspiracy also said that the act happened that they lied about in truth at a later time. The could do me talking about story. Must be what they said to conspire. And they said, but the act that you lied about did take place, but when at an earlier time. But even so, if they hadn't gone to court yet, even if they testified that at an earlier time the master had injured the slave in a way to go free, they would still have to pay. Why? Because the master wouldn't have been obligated yet. The kasagar, okay, he would have to pay. The kasagar, okay, because why? Because he wasn't obligated yet. It doesn't make a difference. Okay, so therefore, what? Right. Okay, right. He wasn't obligated yet. Ella must be what? It must be what? That not only did the later witnesses testify that what they lied about, but what the earlier witnesses testified happened, but at an earlier date. Also, it has to be what? That he went to court. Trial. Then he went to trial, right? And went to court. He's obligated. Okay, good. We did it. Now, get ready. Back to Rava. Rava said what? He read the whole brisa with what we call three sets, which is really two sets plus the witnesses about the conspiracy. Amalei Ravacha Breda Ravika the Ravashi the Yuka the Rava. He says the whole proof, the whole inference that Rava made, but that he showed you that was a case where by definition the middle witnesses were contradicted by the first witnesses, and yet they were considered to be conspirers. So we see that we consider contradiction to be the beginning of conspiracy, the beginning of it's a achosha, the beginning of a zoma, but it just didn't finish. He says, which part of the brisa did he really get that proof from? If he says from the beginning, he's out. What we assume can't be true. Why? It's not really true that the first witnesses did they really contradict the second ones? Think about it for a second. Okay, since if they had not been found to be conspirators, Sadusa Kavasayu Kokaima, their testimony would have actually determined the psak din. Why? The first guy said that he owes for an eye. The second guy said what he owes for a tooth. There's a contradiction. What are we going to pay? What are we going to pay? Even though we're in doubt, what are we going to pay? The lesser. Since everybody agrees that they owe right. So everybody agrees he owes a tooth's worth. So even though, remember, that contradiction is not going to nullify their testimony. On the contrary, it actually supports their testimony, because in the end, exactly what they testified is what we're going to do. Ironically, so okay, the dina kavasayu paskina, we're actually going to paskin the din according to what they said, not because we know that what they said is true, but we know that monetarily, at least what they said is true. Monetarily, the yesh bechla masayim mana, because 100 is included in 200, so the price of a tooth is included in the price of an eye. Okay, now, okay, and therefore what? So had they never been found conspirators, so the owner would have had to pay the price of the price of the tooth, right? Because that everybody agrees. Okay, because in 200 there's 100, so it comes out that we really paskin that didn't like them, and not according to the first hilkach. Therefore, it's not the middle guys who were contradicted. Rav is trying to bring a proof. Even though the middle guys who said tooth were contradicted by the first guys who said I, we're still going to find the middle guys conspirers. So you see that the contradiction is considered the beginning of conspiracy. It's not true. They weren't contradicted. The first guys got contradicted. They weren't contradicted. Mitzia Loma Kashmidi, they weren't contradicted at all. They weren't compromised in any way. So, Rabbi, you have no proof. How maybe the real truth is that if you're contradicted, you cannot be made a conspirator afterward. But these guys, you're right. In absolute terms, there's a contradiction. But in legal terms, there was no contradiction. They weren't compromised one drop by the other people's testimony. So maybe really the truth is that that contradiction is not the beginning of conspiracy. And anybody who's contradicted cannot be convicted of conspiracy. Yeah, cannot be convicted. But the only reason it's not here, pragmatically, they were never contradicted. Incredible argument. Amar Leis, he said to him back, he says, Rabba Samar, Midaresha, like this. from the fact that the Reisha B'Shalosh Kitos, okay, you're right, but still, since he felt that he had to read it with three, like we said, no, it's two plus the conspirators, okay, with three sets of witnesses, Seifa Nami B'Shalosh, okay, therefore what? The end is also with three, and therefore V'daik Me Seifa, and his real proof is really, you're right, you got a good point, that his real proof is only from the later part of the Brisa. Kagon Datu Betray, two witnesses came along. Remember they said, he they said he knocked out his tooth and then his eye, more expensive. And we went to court and we said, that's it. You owe him for the eye. He goes free and you owe him for the eye. And now two other guys came and they said, they said it was the opposite. I didn't know him so much. The order was the opposite. They contradicted them and said he only owes him for a tooth. So the group two contradicted group one. V'nimtzu zomim kamoi, and what? And the last, and what? And then the first group was found to be zomim. Meshalmim demei ayin l'rav. They have to pay for the price of the. They have to pay the price of the eye. Why? Because they conspired to make them pay for the eye, as opposed to the second guys who told the truth that what? That they paid for only a tooth. And if you hold that what that hakosha is not that contradiction is not, so to speak, subsumed into the conspiracy, and we don't consider it a disqualification before the conspiracy, why should they pay when they were made found to be conspirators? They were contradicted. You're forced to say you hear from me. Indeed, you hear it. Okay, a buyer malacha. So what's a buyer going to say? No, very nice point. So how did Rabbah seem to prove from the Sefer that it has to be in case of three witnesses, like he said, and not the case of three sets and not two sets like a buyer, or two and not one like a buyer. A buyer malacha. No, he says. He says, look, I understand. The beginning one I could even grant you. Okay, I could grant you your point that the first one you have to say it's three. And it's more likely to read three, like it's likely to read three, like you said. Shari Kotani, because we learned how Rav Omer came. Remember I mentioned it from Rashi. This is his key weakness. He admits that this is his key weakness. What do you mean the master agrees? If there's only one set of witnesses, what's the master saying? Oh, I'm happy about it. What's he happy about? No witnesses would have been better for him. Why is he happy? That's why it makes much more sense that the people we talk about came after somebody else. Okay, so it makes sense that you had two sets, which is three sets. Okay, Rav Omer came. Ella Seifa, but in the end, Lamali, why do you have to show these kitas? Why do you have to say there were three? Shayevet American, he said, what, the slave is happy? Why is that? Even if there's only two sets of just the witnesses plus the right. Avid Koldu, yeah, I don't care what it is, right? Whatever it is, okay. He's happy. Just say whatever you say. Yeah, let me get out of there. Here, let me get free. Whatever. Okay, no, what I want you to throw in, fantastic. I'm out of here. Great. Okay, so therefore what? Okay, now, so far so good. Now, but one point we do have to see, which is very important. Okay, so we saw the machlokas of Rav, we saw the relative strengths and weaknesses, and we have the machlokas. We have whether contradiction is subsumed to the conspiracy. You can still convict contradicted people to be conspirators or not. Abaya says yes. Abaya says no, and Rabba says yes. Okay, so now look at myself like this. Maskif Laura of Zeira. We learned that you told me that when a guy knocks out an eye, knocks out a tooth, he has to pay for the tooth because the guy's free from the eye. Maskiv Laura Zeira, Ema Sima Eno. Okay, he says, what do you mean? Ema Sima Ema Bad Nipuk. Let me say, why do I say like this? For knocking out the eye alone, the guy goes free. Okay. Okay, he goes out on his own. He pil a shino, okay, shino. If he knocked out his tooth, he goes out with the knockout of the tooth. If in one swoop, before we take legal action, he's knocked out an eye and a tooth. So he goes out with an eye and a tooth. Why should you interrupt? Yeah, he did both. He goes out, but he only goes out. He doesn't go out in between. He goes out with one act of the eye and the tooth. Rabbi says, to answer your kasha, that's why Hashem went out of his way to write the pasuk the way that he did. What did he write? Because it says, okay, l'chafshi yachalchena, the pasuk says, they'll send him out free, tachaseno, in place of his eye, tachaseno, below tachaseno v'shino, in place of the eye, not the eye and the tooth. Okay, and the same thing, what? Tachashino, in place of the tooth, below tachashino, not the eye and the tooth. So the Hashem went out of his way to write the Torah away to answer your query. Yes, exactly. And on the contrary, and you see what? But really, even though he fought with him, he complimented him. He said, "You think just like Hashem thinks." Think about it, because he said, "Look, because Hashem agreed with you. That's why I wrote an extra passage." You see, if you look at, even though he fought with him, look at the compliment he gave him. He said, "Wow, and you think just like Hashem. That's why Hashem went out of his way to write the passage." Really, you don't think of it that way. Amar Avidi Barabin said the following: Afanan nami tanina. Okay, I can also learn what Rava holds from our Mishnah, and that's why this whole discussion is here. In the final announcement, we're going to go back to our Mishnah to try and prove what Rava said, that the contradiction is not seen separately but subsumed into the final conspiracy. Amar Avin Afanan nami tanina. Okay, I can also prove this point of Rava that conspiracy is only that contradiction is only the beginning of conspiracy. We learn if a guy in our Mishnah, we learned a guy stole in front of two witnesses, and also he shechted or sold also in front of the same two witnesses. And now they turned out to be conspiring witnesses. They weren't even there. Mishalmim lo, the esakol, have to pay everything. Now my law, they're going to pay him. What, they're going to pay the whole K-phone 4 and 5, everything. He says, my law, what's the case? The Idu al-Gneva, must be they testified about the theft. And then from a second sighting, right, for a second time, they came back and they testified on the shechting. And they were first found to be conspirators on the stealing. Okay. And then they were found to be conspirators on the shechting. Since they were found to have not even been present at the time that they testified, that they said they testified the first one, here, well, their testimony is out. They're utterly contradicted by the facts. Okay, so as far as the shechting, they've already been they've been utterly contradicted, right? Nevertheless, we learn they have to pay everything. If you're going to say against Rava that we don't subsume the contradiction into the conspiracy, but we're going to look at it separately. Why should they have to pay? Why should they why do the conspirators have to pay for the shechting? Their conspiracy was already contradicted by the original conspiracy, by being convicted of the original conspiracy, and they didn't do anything. It's an out and out proof, all right, that it's subsumed. It's subsumed into it. Amre, so they said, he says, you can't prove Rava from our Mishnah. It's the opposite. What happened was that they first were found to be conspirators on the shechting, in which case, and they were never contradicted about the stealing, and therefore what? And then they were contradicted about then they were found to be conspirators. It's worked exactly. So therefore, we have no proof. So why did you start out with? Because it makes sense. It does make sense to read things, and just to show you. No, so it was so easily knocked out. It wasn't that easily knocked out because it's very reasonable. The norm is chronological. If you said this happened, the norm is to read things chronologically and not counter chronologically. Okay. Now, furthermore, this argument of Abai and Rava, whether contradiction is subsumed into the conspiracy or not, is also other people arguing. We learned Adim. We learned Adim. If witnesses came and said somebody killed somebody, when they were found out not to have been present, one says what? They get killed. Okay, one said they don't get killed. Okay, why is that? Pardon me. I'm sorry, I didn't read right. I'm sorry. Well, no. I read one part wrong. They said somebody killed somebody, and
others said they didn't.
Right, and right, that's the point. I could have to correct it. No, they said a guy killed. Other witnesses say no, he didn't. We were there, and it didn't happen. That's not what happened at all. He never did it. Okay. And then somebody said the first guys weren't there at all.
They were liars.
They weren't present. The first witnesses say he killed. The others say you're wrong. We were there. He didn't kill. So they were contradicted, but not found to be conspirators. Then the witnesses come and say, "What? Those guys were never there." Okay. So now it was a machlokas. They were first contradicted and then found to be conspirators. Okay. It's a machlokas or Yochanan or Lazar. We don't know who said what. Okay, Chadamar one said what, and they're going to get killed. See what we subsume the contradiction into the conspiracy. But Chadamar ain't there again. They don't get killed. Why? Because they were already contradicted before they were found to be conspirators. It's out. The Gemara says Tistayim. I can conclude. I can actually bring a proof. I have a sign. The Rabbi Lazar who the Amar ain't again. So Rabbi Lazar holds that they don't get killed. Who holds like it's Rabbi Lazar who holds like Abaya, that we don't subsume the contradiction into the conspiracy. Domar Elazar said, if they were witnesses who were contradicted in a capital punishment case, Lokin, they get Malchus. Okay, why? They get Malchus. Why? Because they lied. So what do you mean? So for lying, for doing a negative precept, they get punished lying. Now, these Salkadaitik or Lazar who, okay, if Lazar was the one who hold that they get killed, that we subsume the contradiction, on my looking, why should they get whipped? Okay, heavily based in. Whenever a transgression can lead to the court killing a person, we don't whip them because we say that the law wasn't there, the negative wasn't there to get them whipped. It was there to tell me, watch out, don't do that. You're gonna yeah. Right. It's really there to tell them, listen, don't do this. You're gonna get
punished.
Yeah, you're gonna get killed if you do this. Okay, and if we don't whip the guy, the cold lav shnita starts mises basin and look at all of. And any time that we can say that the negative leads to mises basin, we don't whip the guy. Okay, and therefore what? So it can't be what that the guy was going to get killed. Lav shmamino Lazar the Omar ain't no. It must be Lazar holds what that they don't get killed in such a case, and that's why what? That's why they get whipped. The styling where it says indeed you can conclude that it's a good point. Now the Gemara says furthermore. But 1 second, let me ask you a question. He says, Lokin, okay, Trevichina, why should they get whipped? It was only 2 witnesses against 2 others. These guys say it happened. These guys say it didn't happen. Why are you whipping them? Yeah, why? But my chazik to samachta on it's marana. Why'd you believe these guys? Believe those guys. Why'd you rely on these guys? Amar Abaya, so I answered him with Bahar Baraglav, because the case is what the guy showed up. He wasn't a witness. You thought they were contradicted by other witnesses. The guy showed up.
Of my death are great.
So listen to this. I had a guy in the Yeshiva in Eretz Yisrael. I'm not late. I had a guy in the Yeshiva in Eretz Yisrael. And he told us this case that really happened in the United States. It really happened by his boss. It was an incredible trial where it happened in America. My friend's boss is the defense lawyer, and things are going terribly. Things are going terrible. Just terrible. Defense. No, my friend was the prosecution. Listen to this. The defense is going terrible. Every raya is against the guy. It's clear he murdered. He murdered the guy. Every one proof it's hopeless. The defense gets up and he says, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, I know that this case looks terrible for my clients. And I know proof after proof, but argument after argument shows that he was the killer and he did. But I want to tell you something. The law in the United States is that you can't convict a person unless it's clear beyond all reasonable doubt that they did it. And I know at this moment you feel that beyond any reasonable doubt, my client is guilty. But I'm going to demonstrate to you that you do have a reasonable doubt in 1 minute. And therefore you cannot convict my client. So they're all looking. He says, I know. He says, you're surprised. He says, you know how I'm going to show you that they have a reasonable doubt? In 1 minute, the person that you say my client killed is going to walk through that door. I'm going to count to 3, and the dead man's going to walk right in. Are you ready? He says 1, 2, 3. And the whole courtroom turns to the door. The guy doesn't walk in. He says, now, ladies and gentlemen, I know the man didn't walk in. He said, but the fact that despite all the testimony against my client, you all looked, you must have reasonable doubt. And therefore I say, listen to this. He says, listen, he says, you can't convict. But wait, this is a true case. I'm saying, my guy's boss did it. My guy's boss is the prosecution. Listen to this. So the prosecution gets up for his closing argument. He says, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, I want to compliment my opponent. It was an incredible courtroom technique. Unbelievable. But I want to show you that what he said is not true. And that beyond all reasonable doubt, his client is guilty. And I want to tell you why. He said, even though when he counted to 3, everybody in the courtroom turned to look. He said, I didn't. He said, I didn't look to the door. I looked at his client, he said. And when everybody turned at 3, his client didn't look, he says, because he knew he was guilty. And therefore, he said, forget the argument. He like that. Isn't that brilliant? The counter, brilliant. Yeah, brilliant. Jewish guy. Jewish guy. Jewish guy is a cop. Jewish guy. The prosecutor was Jewish. Cop. Anyway, okay, so far so good. Anyway, so the guy showed up himself, said, you made a mistake. You thought the contradiction was by witnesses. No, the contradiction was by that. You can't. That's not a contradiction. That is, when the dead man walks in, that's a proof. That's not a contradiction. That's not a contradiction. That's a proof. Okay, Mishnah. I see you thinking that I shouldn't.
Well, the mission is very
It's not that hard. Yeah, let's do it. Let's go a little far. We got time. Okay. It's not raining today. Pishnayim. Okay. We can get up quickly. Okay, if a guy stole by two in front of two witnesses, but the shechting of the selling was only one witness, which has no value in court, or by the guy admitting himself, it's all nothing. I'm going to fine. Mashan Tashumi Cable is only going to pay the double. Vena Mashan Tashumi Dal doesn't pay the 4 and 5. It's out. Right?
Admitted.
Yeah, he admitted. Ganav Tabach for Shabbos. If he stole and he shechted on Shabbos, where he's going to die, so he's going to be exempt on the money. Ganav Tabach for Zara. He shechted and he stole and he shechted it as a service to Zara. He's going to die. Okay. Ganav Mishalav. If he stole but something belonged to his father, maybe the father died. And only after the father died he shechted. In which case, what? He wasn't doing something completely wrong. It was only wrong vis-a-vis the other brothers, but not vis-a-vis him. Okay. Ganav Higdish. If he stole it and then he sanctified it, and then he shechted it. It belonged to what? It belonged to Hagdesh. Mashan Tashlumi Kev. In all cases, he's only going to pay for the original double for the theft. Mashan Tashlumi Dal he's not going to pay the 4 and the 5 because in all those cases, for the reasons I hope which we outlined, he's exempt. Rabbi Shimon Omer. Now this is a completely different case. It has nothing to do with the original case. Okay, not a case where he stole it and then it became Hagdesh. No. Rabbi Shimon Omer. If he stole an animal from a guy that was already Hegdesh, he stole an animal. Now, there's two ways a guy can make it. Remember, a guy can say, sorry, Allah carbon, I have to bring a carbon. Or he says, Zek carbon is a carbon. He says, I have to bring a carbon. Now I'm going to use this one. Every time that thing gets destroyed, he's obligated because he promises he's going to bring a carbon. If he says this is a carbon, if it gets destroyed, he's not obligated to bring another one. It's not his fault. So now, if a guy stole a carbon that the guy had said, I have to bring a carbon, and this is the one he's about to give. Okay, Mashan Tashtum B'Dalav, he has to pay 4 and 5. The animal belonged to Hagdesh. Why does he pay 4 and 5? So we learned this earlier. Why? Because it's still what? Because why? Why is that? Because we hold that what? Even though it's an argument, that things that are not themselves money, but that lead to money are considered money. So ironically, even though let's say this sheep belongs to Hagdesh, since by stealing the sheep, he causes the owner to have to bring another sheep, even though the sheep belong to God and not to him, since the sheep's existence stops him from having to bring another sheep, stealing the sheep from Hashem is like stealing this guy's non-obligation to big another sheep, and if we have to pay him, so he has to pay him the 4 and 5 because he holds Dabra Gorm Lamam and Kamam Dami. A thing that causes money is just like money. Why? But if he bought one, if the guy said this animal's a carbon and he stole that one, Potter, he doesn't have to pay what? He doesn't have to pay the 4 and 5 to the guy. Why? Because the guy didn't lose anything. Exactly. Okay. I think we can stop. Let's stop and we'll continue on. Sure. Thank you very much for listening. That I know because the guy I know it was true because the guy was in the yeshiva. No. This guy was in the yeshiva and they took it from him. This guy
learned from Perry.
He maybe learned Perry Mason. This guy, the guy was there. He told me he was his boss.
Okay, but it was an episode of Perry Mason.
No, they learned it from his boss.
That's when they
got it from his boss.
When they opened the Drake.
Listen to this.